Imagine learning to draw and becoming a more confident watercolor artist all in one tutorial. Well, imagine no more. Today, we're going to watercolor sketch an irresistibly cute little elephant. Not a single pencil or pen in sight. Now today, I'm using my Art for Joy's Sake watercolor palette, a few round brushes, one of which is pretty tiny, it's a 000, and some Academy watercolor paper. And I'm also using How to Draw Cute Stuff. This book is my inspiration today. Oh my word, I love this book. Let's get into the tutorial, and I would probably recommend watching this first and then going through a second time and painting along. I mean, sketching along. First things first, we're going to be sketching with a really light color peach. So mix up a puddle of peach in your palette. If you don't have a peach right from the palette pre-mixed, even a light pink is going to work. Notice I'm doing an oval and a circle. The circle is the elephant's head. The oval is the body. And I immediately go into the trunk. Now let's slow down the trunk and watch it one more time. I follow the top curve of the circle, which is the elephant's head, and I create a swoop from the top downward. And it's very loose. My hand is loose, my arm is loose. And then I come up underneath about 3/4 of the way down that head circle and make a sweeping mark up to meet the top of the trunk. Now you'll see me working down from that trunk that I just roughed in. And I make 2 marks that aren't really very different from the oval. And I just wanted to get a darker mark in there just to feel a little more established. I immediately go up to the left of the elephant's head and put in what I would call a C. It's just a big C, and it's connecting to the left side of the elephant's head. All right, let's take a look at that all again. And I want you to notice the inspiration page that I was working from in the book. I went over the elephant image in pencil and made those same basic shapes, the oval and the circle. And when you see these pencil sketched in basic shapes, you can also see how I then made the decisions that I did about the ear, about the hind end. I didn't put the tail in yet, but I will, about the little feet. I have turned to Skillshare to start a new course that I just need to tell you is incredible. I've been working with Lisa Bardot of Happy Art Making, and she has a bunch of courses about kind of kickstarting your creativity, but with Procreate. Now, if you're not into Procreate, I get it. Skillshare has so many categories of classes. Of course, a ton of different art and watercolor and sketching and all that, but even beyond cooking and how to, do your taxes and all that kind of fun stuff. It's all there. You truly feel like you're joining a community because there's a great section in each course where you can share your work and chat and get help. Friends, Skillshare is being so generous. The first 500 people to use my link in description or scan the code on the screen are going to receive an entire month free trial of Skillshare. That's a lot of free learning. So let's go back and work through all of those elements and slow them down a bit. Coming right underneath that trunk and really where the elephant's mouth is opening, which I just indicated with a little wonky triangle. Now going up to that ear, look at that, just a C mark connecting with the head. Notice these marks are not perfect. I'm letting the paint run out and I'm using a very washed out, watered down color. Notice on the back end, on his butt, if you will, I made a few sketchy, scratchy marks until I kind of found that correct mark. And now I'm roughing in his legs. The beautiful thing about watercolor sketching with no pencil, no, you can't erase, but you can very lightly find your way with very sheer paint. And it creates a more lively illustration when it's all said and done. You just have to trust me on that one. Tip number 1, if you're nervous about not being able to erase, just remember, focus on those really strong basic shapes and their relationship to one another, the spatial relationship. How far apart are they? Do that and you won't have to worry about erasing too much. Now at this point, putting in that little bow tie should feel really fun. It's basically a rounded edged triangle on the left, full view, and then one that is a little bit smaller and angled down ever so slightly to the bottom right corner of the page. Slightly. That's it. And a little circle in the middle. Now I'm mixing up some gray and I'm taking a larger round brush and essentially, let me just spoil it for you, I'm going to lightly fill the entire shape of the elephant. The feet, the belly, the butt, the ears, everything. Notice how I'm dragging some of the darker color I first laid down in the elephant's head. I'm dragging it with a little extra water on my brush throughout the rest of the elephant silhouette. As I get out to the trunk, I have very little paint on my brush. It's mostly water. And I love that the watercolor now is spreading out along everything and creating these light and dark areas naturally because I don't feel compelled to constantly refill my brush. And here we go with tip number 2. Don't constantly refill your brush with paint. Get a decent amount of paint on your brush in the beginning and spread it out and let it run out. Now let's go back and look at the areas, slow them down a little bit that I didn't paint. The bow tie and the inside of the ear, because those will eventually be pink. Now I'm tapping in a little bit of a darker gray on the rightmost ear and on the butt. And when I did that, I added in the tail. I didn't sketch in the tail in the early stages, but you may want to when you watch this again and work along with me. And it honestly is kind of the same swoop as the trunk, just in the opposite direction on the other side of the elephant. You can have fun here playing around, lifting some of the color out, adding some more of the gray back in. Don't play too long because you can kind of just get lost and it could get overworked, but give yourself some fun and enjoy this part. Now I'm clearly enjoying myself because I started to add a little bit of blue into the areas where I had just added a darker gray. I decided to lift that gray out for the most part and add in a little blue because honestly, the gray was getting a little boring for me. But you do you, boo. Now, if you're adding in a second color, the blue, now I'm adding the purple, and yours isn't moving on the page, it's just kind of staying put, you may want to re-wet your entire elephant where the gray was initially painted on, and then start adding in the additional color. Notice how in the legs, I'm kind of refining the shape and the silhouette. I notice that that back leg on the left-hand side needs to come down a little more, and I'm just ever so slightly editing the shape and the line of that front leg. This is the time to do those types of things. And again, it's very forgiving. Sketching with watercolor and no pencil is more forgiving than you think because notice those original lines that I created, they've all but disappeared at this point. All right, it's time. Grab your favorite pink and get a little stroke onto that white of the ear and then blend that small stroke of pink out with just a little bit of water on your brush. Now, the grays and the purples and the blues are still wet, so I'm being awfully brave here. I would actually suggest, if you want a little more control overall, let that first layer we just did, all the grays, the blues, the purples, let that dry completely. So tip number 3, friends, if you like a little more crispness in your watercolor, cleaner edges, and not so much risk of those weird dry marks, the cauliflowering, let your first layer dry before you add in the second layer. Now I'm going back in with a damp, clean brush and I'm blending some of the areas where the pink and the grays started to do a little dance and I didn't really like the way they were drying. So just a damp brush, a little bit of water on that brush and a little bit of blendy blend, even a blot with a paper towel. And now that I blotted it, I actually really like some of the textures that it left behind. It's giving the painting at this point a lot of character. Okay, so you might be shocked. I've left all of these watermarks. That's crazy. I love this kind of magic that watercolor does. I absolutely adore it. And that'll bring me to tip number 4. If you want to really avoid the risk of these cauliflower marks that just look uneven and jagged, use less water than I did in the early stages. And of course, a reminder to let the first layer dry before you put on the pinks. All right, going back to that outline, friends, I mixed up a color that isn't black with greens, blues, browns, a touch of red, some purple. I just don't love black for outlines. And so here we are. Mix up a big puddle of that. I am now using my 000 and I'm going around the edges and I'm purposely not being perfect about how I outline. Adding in those eyes, they're just basically upside down U's that you fill in a little bit heavier on one side than the other. Going into that bow tie, adding a little bit of outlining. Notice how my outlines are not perfect. The line weight changes. They're not perfectly consistent or continuous, if you will. Tip number 5, this layer must be dry before you start outlining, or you're going to have yourself a hot mess. I'm going to go right into tip number 6 as you watch me outline. I would highly recommend a little bit of practice on a scrap piece of watercolor paper. Practice some of those ear curves, practice them repetitively, maybe 10 to 20 times again and again and again. And it's a way just to warm up your hand really easily. With a tiny brush like this, especially one that is synthetic like mine, you're going to be refilling that brush often. All right, this line that I'm adding coming down from the top of the head and meeting up with the trunk is really important. Probably just as important as those adorable little hairs I decided to add to the top of his head. I love it so much. This elephant wasn't meant to be perfect, and because of all the textural moments that I let stay behind and I let them shine through, I didn't try to smooth them all out. That gives you some flexibility with your outline, also not having to be perfect. Now, you go ahead and add in that bow tie color in whatever you want. I wanted a little bit of a teal for a little bit of pop, and I'll leave you with something that my old artist friend Rosemary, and she's not old, just I've known her forever. And she said, if you're going to do something that feels a little off, a little subversive, and in this case, it's a really, really loose wash of a bunch of colors on this elephant with lots of cauliflowering, you should go all the way with the weirdness. And so I'm following through with the weird washes with a little bit of a shaky outline and the weird little sprouts of hair on the top of his head and the color on his bow tie that doesn't quite seem to match anything else going on. So tip number 7 for you today, friends, put down the pencil and go all the way with the weird. Happy painting and sketching. Until next time.